Hello to all of our friends watching. Thank you for joining us today for Love No Matter What with Rick Long, pastor of Grace Church in Arvada, Colorado. We are so excited to be with you for the next 30 minutes and hope this message is encouraging and impactful to you. Here's Pastor Rick.
Today I'm talking about relationships in life that are unique. I mean, sometimes when you think of relationships, think about what we talked about the first few weeks, marriage and family. Last week talked about blending a family. But you know what? We also have a relationship and should have a healthy relationship with our heroes, our first responders, and our veterans. And even though I'm going to talk a little bit about our police officers, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be up here with Chief Link Straight from Arvada. We're also going to have a very special detective from Aurora who lost his home in the fire. And so you just don't want to miss what's coming up. But I want to jump into this. And some of you see that we've got the Rubik's Cube as our backdrop, solving the relationship Rubik's Cube, because that's what it feels like so often. Yeah, I don't know if you remember this, but I mentioned that the Rubik's Cube was invented in the 70s. It was actually 1974, a guy named Erno Rubik invented he called it the magic cube, and then it came to America in 1980, 81, and the Ideal Toy Company bought it and patented it and got it out to 350 million people, creating tension and stress worldwide, right? That's an amazing toy. It's the most popular selling toy puzzle in history. Now, one of the things that you learn if you like Rubik's Cube and you're a nerd like me and you like to get into that stuff is the Rubik's Cubers competition. And we talked about Josh. We had him the first week do the Rubik's Cube in 15.8 seconds. But how do you know when the Rubik's Cube is actually at a place where the competitors have an equal opportunity? Well, they do something called scrambling. Scrambling is using 20 randomly generated moves to mess up the cube, giving cubers an equal challenge to solve the puzzle. Now, what does that have to do with our first responders? Well, they are scrambling to save lives in the most difficult situations. Matter of fact, I define it this way, where first responders and soldiers, men and women alike, are thrown into impossible situations and must calmly and courageously put the pieces of the tragic puzzle back together in order to save some lives. Thank God for our first responders. Thank God for our first responders, our police officers, our veterans in this room. Thank you. We're going to learn what our responsibility is as believers in Jesus Christ when it comes to first responders. You might say, well, what does this have to do with the Bible? What does this have to do with our Christian life? Everything. You and I, Christian, are called to be first responders. So if you want to know what it looks like to truly serve Jesus the way he came into this world, served and died for us, then you got to listen close today. Now, in case you don't know this, the toll that is taken mentally, emotionally, and physically upon our first responders is breathtaking in a very negative way. Take a look at these stats, and I want you to write some of this down so that you remember it. Do you know that police officers and firefighters are more likely to die from suicide than in the line of fire? They're more likely to die from suicide. 85% of first responders have experienced symptoms related to mental health conditions. That's like almost 9 out of 10. A depression and post-traumatic stress disorder are 5 times more likely, more common in first responders than the average profession. How about this? PTSD is 15% higher for soldiers than the average person. 30% of soldiers develop mental health problems within 3 to 4 months after being home. You might think it gets easy then. It doesn't. Both soldiers and first responders are 5 times more dependent on drugs and alcohol than the average person. About a year and a half ago, I was challenged to do this on social media where you did 22 push-ups a day for 22 days. This is when I discovered this statistic, that 22 veterans commit suicide every single day. And the most susceptible group is men ages 50 to 59. That's my age group. The average lifespan of a police officer after they retire is 5 years. First responders, police officers, are in 188 life-threatening situations on average before they retire. So in case you think they've got a luxurious life, eating donuts and giving you traffic tickets, you are gravely mistaken. Now, it's not a surprise that our culture is at a very unhealthy place because of a few bad eggs, which, by the way, there are bad pastors. There are bad housewives. There are bad stay-at-home fathers. There are some bad police officers and not so good first responders, but the majority, men and women, are amazing heroes and incredible people that sacrifice. And so today, in a moment, I'm gonna have some very special guests come out, and we're gonna share this service together. But, you know, many times we look at the Bible and we fail to understand that it addresses every relationship there is. As a matter of fact, what do first responders and soldiers and frankly Christians have in common? Well, first and foremost, each one is willing to put their own safety at risk to protect ours. You think about that? Probably not. Probably not unless there's a siren that comes on behind you and inconveniences you. And it really bothers me, the people that don't pull over. Really does. And that's probably one of the primary times you think about our first responders unless you need them. You know, Joshua took over for Moses. And Joshua had the responsibility of leading 2.5 million Israelites. Can you imagine that daunting task? You are now in charge, Joshua, of all these people. The Bible says he was so nervous. He said, I can't do it. I just picture him over in the corner with his thumb in his mouth. I can't do it. Pick someone else, right? And this is what God said 4 times. This is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. A first responder, especially one that has faith in Christ, understands that they are running toward danger while we are running away from it. You know what else? Each one is committed to serving everyone in their community and nation. They don't ask their color, their socioeconomic standing. They don't ask their condition, whether they're addicted to a drug, or they go into a situation to save lives. Romans 14:18 says, and when you serve Christ in this way, you please God and are approved by others, or at least you should be. You should be experiencing that. And finally, each one is willing to pay the ultimate price to save a life. You know, when my son Jordan became a firefighter with his best friend Joe, who's still a firefighter, I just remember the overwhelming weight that our entire family felt. And I remember praying every day for him, but especially when it was Adams County Fire and Rescue is fighting a fire in this factory or going into this situation. But later I realized that literally every situation they're in, it can be life-threatening. Being on the side of the road after a tragic accident on I-70 and somebody hits them, and they're driving by not paying attention. It's always putting themselves on the line. And finally, each one's willing to pay that price. Look at John 15:13. For the greatest love of all is a love that sacrifices all. And this great love is demonstrated when a person sacrifices his life for his friends. That is the greatest love of all. Now, most of us probably know John 3:16, even if you're not a Christian. You've seen it at a football game or some kind of event. It's the most famous verse in the Bible, as it should be. It's the most important. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, that whoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. But I ask you, Christian, do you know 1 John 3:16? It says this. This is how we have discovered love's reality. Jesus sacrificed his life for us. Because of this great love, we should be willing to lay down our lives for one another. If anyone sees a fellow believer in need and has the means to help him, yet shows no pity and closes his heart against him, how is it even possible that God's love lives in him? Beloved children, our love can't be abstract theory we only talk about, but a way of life demonstrated through our loving deeds. We know that the truth lives within us because we demonstrate love in action. Circle those 3 words, love in action, which will reassure our hearts in his presence. Christians, we give an awful lot of lip service to God. But I want to introduce you to a couple of people who have put their lives on the line literally for our community. Ellie Stevens is a Air Force vet. She is a psychiatrist. She teaches our tribe, the head of Advancing Warriors, and Jordan Long, paramedic, firefighter, founder of Revital, Colorado. Would you welcome them to the stage with me? What is our role as a church? I want you to write this down. First, it's to pray for our heroes daily. Do not underestimate the power of prayer, Christian. If you underestimate the power of prayer, then you're living an underestimated life. The power of prayer is us going before the throne room of God and interceding on behalf of other people. I can't think of a better group than those who are on the front lines. I mean, we got soldiers in Ukraine now. We've got battles that are happening in places we don't even know about. We'll talk to a Green Beret in a minute who went on missions that you'll never know about, or neither will I. Look at Romans 12:12. Let your hope make you glad. Be patient in time of trouble and never stop praying. Jordan, it's so important that we're praying for our first responders and that we're lifting them up. There's many things that you see every day that they're going through, and obviously your boots on the ground for us for the Marshall Fire. Tell us a little bit about the power of prayer and really what we can do more of as a ministry.
Yeah, I mean, I think you talk about it a lot when you talk about, praying for specific people, praying for specific things. It connects you at a deeper level with these individuals. It also gives you a heart and a little bit more compassion for what they may or may not be going through in a judgment-free place. And I think culture and society and the media has portrayed, and you talked about it earlier, but has portrayed such a negative light surrounding police officers and first responders. To a point of where we are losing great police officers and firefighters at a staggering rate, which isn't good for the community as a whole. And until we start praying for them and the increased pressures that are out there, everybody has their cell phone out on calls now, waiting for you to mess up, editing it in ways that portray it in a negative facet. There's a lot of these increased stresses and pressures that the job didn't have 10 years ago. And so I think your prayers can do a lot more than you really think.
And just so you know, the law was just passed in Congress and in the state of Colorado that a first responder and a police officer can be sued, personally liable for anything and everything. So, there's a lot going on that maybe we're not even aware of. Ellie, I had the privilege of reading Unshackled, your book that comes out in June. And I thought when I was reading it, I was just reading it as a pastor to write an endorsement, but I was reading it as a person who suffered trauma. And I felt such release and help. I couldn't put it down. Every day I would look forward to reading it. And I'm very excited for everybody to pick it up, whether they're a veteran or not. But you see so much pain and so much trauma. How can the church, really support what Advancing Warriors is doing? Give us some ideas of really what you're seeing and our connection and partnership.
So I'm really grateful for Grace. We've been able to run a tribe group last fall and carry over that in a community. So we have 2 other programs on top of Tribe to continue to build that community. We have monthly meetups. We have treatment that we offer for free to first responders and veterans if they need it.
That's great.
And we really appreciate having that space and having the support of this church with that group. I would say that with trauma and with my book, I try to help relay that point of everybody experiences trauma and loss at some point. And it creates these walls that we build up where we keep other people out, we keep God out because we're trying to protect ourselves. And so if we can recognize our own trauma within our lives, with the environment and the safety of God, and knowing that his love is greater than any trauma that we've ever faced, and that he will be with us, walk alongside us throughout everything, then we can start having that empathy for other people, for our first responders, for our veterans, understanding, okay, yeah, I'm go through a trauma. I'm not going through the trauma to the extent that these first responders and veterans, this type of evil and darkness that they see on such frequency, but I can relate in that way. And so it's just providing that community of love, which you are, that compassion, that you're loving others as they are and not as they should be, and really just having that connection and having that space of community where first responders and veterans can come together in an environment where they have shared experiences, they're able to relate on a deeper level, and then experience that growth from God in order to be able to relate to the rest of the church.
Oh, so good. Guys, I want you to know this. So often there's a misunderstanding in the Christian community. It's actually rather nauseating because it's cloaked in false humility. Like, well, you can't bring honor to people. Don't honor. Only God gets the glory. That is actually false. God gets the glory when we honor one another. Let's write this down. Pick specific ways to honor our heroes. And I'm going to describe that to you from a biblical standpoint. Look at this in Romans 12:10. Be devoted to tenderly loving your fellow believers as members of one family. And then he says this, try to outdo yourselves in respect and honor of one another. We're not supposed to just honor our first responders and honor one another. We're supposed to try to outdo each other in honor. And so there's so many ideas that come to mind, and we'll get some of those ideas from Ellie and Jordan, and in a moment, Dan. But look at 1 John 3:17 again. Just look at it one more time. If anyone sees a fellow believer in need and has the means to help him, yet shows no pity, that's the word compassion, and closes his heart against him, here's a really difficult question. How is it even possible that God's love lives in him? You ever thought to yourself about yourself or maybe another Christian, I'm not really a good Christian right now? Or are they really a believer and acting that way? Well, the number one way that we sort of deny our faith is when we see a need and we don't meet it. When we say, oh, I love you, be warmed and filled, but we do nothing to meet that need, nothing to clothe that person, nothing to feed that person. You know, Ellie, before we bring Dan out, I'm going to ask both of you this. When you really look at ways that the community here can honor our first responders and our veterans, I think it just takes, this church is amazing, but it just takes hearing the stories of what they're going through. Tell us just a little bit more about, unpack that trauma, that pain, and really the victory that's on the other side of just getting in that community with Tribe and getting conversation going.
Yeah, so trauma has a way of promoting hiding and isolation. Yeah. And the more traumas that you face, the more you hide, the more you isolate. And we don't learn how to process trauma. We don't learn that in school. No. A lot of it is just we don't understand it. Yeah. And so as we walk through with Tribe and that curriculum, it's kind of helping people understand, hey, you can actually process your trauma with God. That's the safest place to process it. You can process your emotions. You don't have to continue to bottle it up and hide it. And so with my trauma, it opened up my eyes to that darkness and that intensity and that just desire to continue to stay in hiding, to avoid relationships because you're afraid that something like that's going to happen again, to avoid loss, to avoid it's just overall avoidance. Community, it's basically the remedy to that avoidance, because you're with other people. You can see your emotion in your sorrow or sadness mirrored in their eyes, and that brings you hope, and that brings you encouragement, and that makes you realize you're not alone. Amen. And so all of these, the first responders and veterans that are experiencing such intense trauma, I didn't experience the same traumas as they did, but it's this separation. You feel separated from God, you feel separated from everyone that you love, and you feel like you're utterly alone. Yeah. And so I was in that space. I had my mom with me the whole time, which she's amazing. And that's another piece where like the supporters, they're underserved as well. And so we're vital having retreats and outings for them, and we're providing support groups for the spouses too. But she was amazing. It was just that she didn't go through the same experience that I had gone through, so she didn't understand the extent.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to share it because I didn't want to hurt her.
Right.
And so this community helps provide that space where we're all hurting in some way, but we can actually find a way out of the hurt. So I actually, the trauma that I faced, it opened my heart to a joy and a peace that I'd never felt before.
Yeah.
A restlessness that I was carrying my whole life, a burden I was carrying to prove my worth, to a point where I realized I'm worth the blood of Christ who died for me.
Yes.
And so that changed everything. And so hopefully we can help other people see the same thing.
So good. God cannot love you any more and will never love you any less than he does based on his grace. I'm going to save this question for you, Jordan. We're going to bring Dan out right now. Would you welcome Green Beret and Ellie's husband, Dan Strathman? Man, so glad you're here, brothers. Thank you, man. Dan, I talked to Ellie, said, I'd really like you to share some of the stories from the book. And she said, why don't we just have my husband share his story? I'm like, is Dan good with that? Oh, he will be. He'll be fine with that. So you're already falling right into marriage, buddy. It's just natural for you. Dan, seriously, Green Beret, West Point grad, tell us your story.
Sure. So I was in the Army, started off my career as an infantryman, and then I was in Special Forces after that for the rest of my career. And I was really blessed throughout that entire experience of always having a community, friends, familiar faces, even though it's kind of a nomadic lifestyle, moving every couple of years, plus deployments and all that stuff. There's friends always there. And, I say friends, but really, a brotherhood, super deep bond. I mean, just through any kind of struggle or adversity, you can, build those super deep bonds with people. And so, lots of memories sitting there, finishing a training event, friends who were sitting there catching our breath, like, hurting a little bit, and like, oh man, that was really terrible. Yeah, we did well enough, right? We're still here, and you just do that every day or almost every day for almost a decade, and you build some pretty strong friendships on top of doing some work in some pretty inhospitable corners of the world, and you build I call them friends, but it's more than that. But in 2017, I resigned from active duty, moved out to Colorado, and didn't have that community anymore. Immediate family and some friends, they've been just huge in my life, but didn't have that same presence that I had before. And started to struggle with an identity crisis as I was attaching what I did to my identity, and so I don't have that anymore. I'm not going to have that rush anymore. I'm not going to have that feeling, and just really struggling with that. And on top of that, at the time, I was going through some really, really serious relationship troubles. My best friend passed away. He was another Green Beret, passed away, and lost some other friends roughly around the same time, and just really started to get into this really dark, angry, isolated, self-imposed isolation, if you will. But had this really bad and skewed perspective that God was punitive. Just not correct, but that's the way, that was the barrier that I was putting up. And really started to kind of hit rock bottom with it about a year and a half ago. Luckily, thankfully, found grace, and it's been amazing to me. Since I started coming here, and then not all that long ago, you had mentioned there's a group for a small group for veterans and first responders kicking off. And I was like, okay, I got to do that. So I started to feel that conviction, like, okay, something's got to change, and just got into the program, got into Tribe, and it was phenomenal. And there were really three big things that I was praying for at the time, and first being a sense of community, which I was really, really needing. that I would have a purpose in my life, and then God to bring a godly woman to my life, and it kind of all happened in one fell swoop, which is pretty cool. And God was probably like, okay, finally, you're catching on, So I was starting to surrender and really starting to see how God can work, and it's been amazing. But when I was participating in the groups, like Ellie mentioned, it's you don't have to share your deepest, darkest secrets.
Sure.
It's building it, being able to have a conversation with folks who understand your background, and you kind of know the secret handshake, if you will.
Yep.
And that was amazing. And just how authentic and genuine, transparent, and absolutely, completely judgment-free, condemnation-free the groups were. It was amazing. Really helped me to identify some of those big problems that I was having that was leading to my anger, so I could start to confess and surrender those.
And you said fun. It's just
it was fun. Yeah, it was my. I looked forward to every Thursday night. It was a good couple hours just to get together with some cool people, some nice people, and just learn from each other. And it's been fantastic. And that community building that came from it. We did the tribe group, and then we had several of us that were in that group got together, and we did a small group for the 50 Days of Good News. And then from there, after the holidays, now we're doing the second program that Ellie wrote from the Advancing Warrior series. So we're doing that all together. So it's just continued, and it's been fantastic. And so our hope is that there's more folks that we can get into the programs, and just build out the community and just help each other, really.
And you've stepped out of a long-time career to step into Advancing Warriors. You guys are pretty much volunteering that time to really take this both throughout the state and the nation. And that means our commitment and our dedication as a ministry is to be behind you guys in that. Let me give you this last challenge before we hear from him again. Provide opportunities to share the gospel with our heroes. As Jordan mentioned, many of them are, they sort of have the attitude that that's religion, it stays separate, or they don't even have really a faith-based background. And if you go to 1 John 3 again, I'm not going to read it all, but the very end says, we know that truth lives within us because we demonstrate love in action, which will reassure our hearts in his presence. Jordan, tell us a little bit about the vision of Revital moving forward, how we can be more proactively involved, because you're the bridge builder. You're taking people really to organizations like Ellie's to get that mental health care. And then, tell us a little bit about the retreat house and Dave Reaver. That's a pretty cool deal.
Yeah, I think just to the first point of sharing the gospel, I mean, so many of us, when we hear that, we think we got to go preach it. But really, it's just about knowing the places or the organizations where they might hear it and pointing them in that direction.
I pray you found today's message hopeful and life-changing. At Grace Church, our mission statement is simple: hope for everyone and a home for anyone. We live this out through 4 simple words: love no matter what. Please reach out to us so we can meet you. If you put your faith in Christ for the first time today, please visit lnmw.tv to fill out a new believer form so we can celebrate your decision and walk alongside you in this exciting journey. We love you, friend, and so does Jesus. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next Sunday.